Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another Mishmashing Battle Lounge with the 2MK team. Our lounge is already full, which is kind of surprising, but not entirely, as we have a lot of team members and visitors we somewhat know getting in already. Therefore, at the moment, I can't guarantee you that there's any spot to look from, but if you are planning to try to join in later on, or are just watching the stream for the first time and deciding whether or not you want to give that a try, particularly because the earlier you get in, the more likely is you'll actually get a match. This is a 3 rounds, first to 2 character select on lounge. And in general, you can expect to have a decent connection to most of the people in it if you live anywhere on the rim of the Atlantic Ocean. If you have really good internet, you can probably go a little inland from there regardless. But we do have different people from different places today, and while we'll be trying to avoid as much serious problematic lag as possible, do understand that you might not have the best connection to everyone. Unfortunately, since we still don't trust the ping indicators, as evidenced by the fact that even if I put up certain restrictions, people still manage to join it, and having decent connection to a ton of people anyway, regardless of their relatively lower ping, yeah, we don't tend to judge based on that. We wait until we get actual lag happening. After all, this is no tournament. And if you are the sort of person who participates in online tournaments, you might need some lag experience anyway. This type of lounge with this many people in it tends to go on for a while beyond the direct intended end of stream. So you can also probably hope for that. But as you can see, we're quite full. Zangiefra. Well, USA Team 2021. I'm gonna have to come up with a shorter name for them. I'm just gonna go with Go Team for now. Hopefully this isn't too bad, but that big freeze... Actually, that big freeze doesn't always mean anything. It could just mean some weird nat change or something like that. But we'll see in a bit. No. But unfortunately that has somewhat robbed them of their turn. And it looks like they're headed out. Sorry. I guess Go Team went a different way. Oh, we have one open slot, but the report I'm receiving is that that was just a blip and we can expect Omni to be back. I would have put it to 8, but in the end it doesn't help. Someone usually needs to drop to back just to make sure that everyone gets their matches. There will be some of that today. After all, we don't all need as much practice. I, for one, have already played Street Fighter for today in the EU stream we had earlier. And 1 or 2 matches after that, just randomly. So now I guess we can see whether or not this connection is as bad as it was showing us it might be. And I'll probably get the report on that when that time comes as well. It is good to have a second look actually from a different perspective. But it can be a little hard to specifically give information to other players when discussing the way you flow. This matchup can be somewhat hard for DWuulfe, particularly against players other than me, because their perspective on how to play the character is different. While I have learned to break through without taking much damage, in a way that does help my opponent, help our Necalli, because it's easier to deal with defense, as she is a footsies character and doesn't generally have as much overwhelming things. Than it is to have to deal with being on offense. That said, it's definitely not that DWuulfe doesn't understand the offense of this matchup, it's the execution that's hard. It involves a lot of micro walks and a lot of very specifically timed punishes. And of course it's entirely possible to end up losing quite a lot of health relatively in that space of time. See, even there, that's technically another minor execution difficulty. That timing was suspicious, but it didn't work out exactly.
Chun-Li wins.
I'm not really sure why DWuulfe went for the sweep, given that the opponent did seem to be definitively planning to just sit there and block. But I suppose that is a possibility, that just approaching, it might have been a good time to stick out a light kick to prevent DWuulfe from getting closer and not necessarily get hurt in the same way. But yeah, see there, normally I'll try to get around that rather than letting the match slow down a lot. And that's a large difference in style that you can immediately see at play here. Our current guest is absolutely willing to let the match just slow down and even move backward. This is a lot more like my tournament play, except that I just stand there instead of actually walking away. Which, honestly, against Necalli is probably not a great idea, because reacting to this guidance is hard enough that you probably should block. Corner guard, and success.
Round 2. Fight.
I'm not sure if that punish was possible from that range. I don't normally see that particular spacing in this matchup. I think I would have tried to block. If there could be anything said to be a limitation of DWuulfe's style here, it is not being able to land the whiff punishes required to do damage. Because there are a lot of them that are basically required. And while I was talking about execution as a whole before, it's not as simple as just execution. The whiff punishes are specific to the flow of the match and not just, can I execute something complicated or hard. I'm not sure if that was meant to be a fake out or not. Was not expecting an attempt on that jump at all. But, oh, anti-air's not ready.
Chun-Li wins. Let's do this.
I have no idea what the connection between these two players is like, at all. I know that the Chun-Li is sometimes stuttery. I think we've seen this on a previous stream, to me. And I'm told slightly stuttery to OmniRabbit, for example. But this could either be better because they're actually closer to each other, or terrible. So assume that I have no way to explain what is happening here. Especially with these two characters, where with punishing and tight execution can be so much of the matchup, not to mention spacing. Any flickering around on the screen will just make it borderline unplayable.
For those who I wish to protect, I will fight you.
Round one.
One thing I have been hearing is that the one-sided lag seems to have been reduced somewhat. So at least we are relatively sure that if it's stuttery for one, it's probably stuttery for both of them.
Fight.
Okay, now I'm no longer sure. I do love that move, but not enough to choose it as a V-trigger. Just give me like some special EX Kolin that's actually Kikosho. I can totally live with that.
Fight. two. Fight.
Know that no matter how good you get at this game, you will still always need to be able to beat people who just hit sweep. How you choose to go about this is entirely up to you, but just know that you will have to beat someone that just hit sweep. Not quite right.
Chun-Li wins.
Well, I don't really feel like the lag changed the outcome of that match too much. Maybe it made it harder on the winner's side to actually like do everything. But on the other hand, it's sweep. So hard to say. Ping out this time? Ping out. But we are shrunk back down. Character select is on, as I mentioned. And now, there are obviously open slots for all of you who want to join in. You can also expect some people to be shifting around somewhat.
Kolin. M.Bison.
So you may be able to get in and get your match sooner than the number of people in front of you would imply. We had this one earlier on the EU stream, and I was thinking about it after that stream because on that stream I was mentioning that we know this matchup well enough, and because of the way the characters are able to put up shields and stay out of the way of the other's main offense, we don't actually use many of the core first order strategies of the matchup itself. I don't expect that to change now. Still cannot figure out why I can't cancel that anymore. Maybe it's the first time I'm supposed to cancel it?
Round two. Fight.
I still play this character a lot like a grappler. But I think the reason it works is not necessarily because of the take throw so much, but simply that you can't be sure whether or not you can reach at the time it happens. Even when she's very close to you, she has so many options to put her out of that space that it can be hard to decide, I'm going for the throw attack here, I'm going to wait and see what happens. And then the reaction to it just gets more difficult.
Round 2. Fight.
Oh, it wasn't enough. I'll count that one under a comedy of errors from my end. But there's not much you can do when you've made that many mistakes, execution or otherwise, except get right back on it and try to relax, not necessarily because you don't expect to make the mistakes again, but because you realize that you did. If you're in the mental space where you are making those types of mistakes, it's not necessarily going to go away. Another good issue that I can running into here is that I started to throw less because I figured it would be my opponent's way of movement that would cause me the problems, but the answer wasn't to throw less because my expectation was wrong.
just didn't happen.
You lose. Let's do this.
One sort of thing you did see in that matchup was me, once again, specifically choosing to risk certain forms of damage over others. Due to having no specific fear of Bison's various Psycho Inferno spacings, seeing Bison at a max range where standard pressure isn't likely to happen means it's still worth going for either mid or low parry, because most of the time what will happen is that I'll get beaten by either a further dash into throw, which is bad, but not more so than if I blocked. I suppose the lack of being able to tech it is a problem. And of course, the Psycho Inferno itself. But as Psycho Inferno doesn't do much damage, and Kolin has so many ways out of any follow-up pressure once she has meter, the opponent can't necessarily decide, I'm going to push on this. In fact, my opponent's mindset generally relies on not doing that. Meaning I can take the risk that the one time there is a real attack, something I have to worry about and not just the Inferno, which I don't have a problem with, I will still counter that move. Now of course, as a Bison player you could just use the medium punch and kick interchangeably and assume that literally it's a 50-50, even if I do parry. But she does have some strike invincibility options as well, which would also get away from the Inferno, but the Inferno does put up a sufficient shield. Seeing how to use that shield and therefore win based on it is something that can get picked up a lot as you go. For example, in this matchup, the way JustVine's offense works means it's very difficult for OmniRabbit to get any offense going. The match might end up going on for a long time, but the one in control of it doesn't generally care as much. The important thing to think about is that once you are in control of it, your opponent is going to be looking for the first chance they can find to turn it around. But if things are going slowly, you have all the time in the world to build up an entire tactical situation and trickery to prevent that from happening. So our Bison is able to play this match more so from the perspective of, I have control of this entire thing, and this forces some other options from Lara's side. Once you've got enough offense and defense to just move faster than other people, or you've got enough benefit from your character and the way the two characters interact to basically buy yourself more time, then you can usually use that confidence to set up a winning condition, even if it's not necessarily on the same round. You see that demonstrated here to a point. Being at a life deficit here doesn't necessarily matter, because Bison can do that, first of all, but has a lot of possible misleading options. Putting your opponent under enough stress means that they can't use their standard skills, and now OmniRabbit is down to having no meter, which is effectively the win condition either way. Even if JustVine is to lose this match, the relatively depleted meter on that side means it's going to be a lot harder to put anything into use. Similarly, Bison is better at quickly doing the conversions at the end of matches than other characters, so sitting on this for a while isn't usually that meaningful. But in the end, even more meter had to be used up. So now we're back to approximately where we were at the start of round 1. And that situation benefits Bison quite a lot. You can see OmniRabbit therefore having to immediately be more aggressive, partially to try to get 2 meter so that something else can be done. I was not expecting the raw activation, but I don't think Omni was either. And another setup.
M.Bison wins.
The moment of massive tension to distract your opponent from everything else going on, and then pulling out the move that you were planning to use but they weren't thinking about.
Round 1. Fight.
If you're in Omni's position in this sort of situation, your best bet is to do whatever you can to not spend too much time thinking about the outcome of the match. That sort of thing puts you in a mental state of stressfully watching for your options and stressfully watching for motion. Basically, if you spend too much time trying not to lose in this situation, things get much worse, usually very fast. From the Bison side, similarly, it's important to never spend any time thinking about the life difference. Even if it gets huge, you generally shouldn't be thinking about it, because Bison is winning this off of general interactions. So, functionally, as long as Bison isn't dead, the rest is irrelevant. These two characters don't often trade moves, and therefore you don't have to worry as much about a situation where having really low health would turn a situation that normally favors you, or is normally at least passable, into a bad one. Oof, spacing. One of the important things to do, though, is to spend more time thinking about how to convince your opponent that you are going to attack, as this is pretty vital. Letting up on that is normally where the problem appears. But this can be a little hard to figure out sometimes, because whether or not it's actually a good idea to attack depends on a lot of functions in your opponent's character, not all of which you are necessarily familiar with. Still, even at this point, it's again, I'm not going to worry here because Bison can always make this. Even in this position where you're not sure. To make your opponent think too hard is the whole game.
So if you find yourself thinking too hard, it's usually a sign that even if you do win, you weren't doing quite as well as you could have.
Round one. Fight.
If you're in the position where you actually have the life lead as Bison in this matchup, one of the definite things you should do is, like, turn off your brain a little bit. Even if this is likely to lead to you taking some damage, trusting just your muscle memory in this matchup isn't really all that dangerous. The character has a lot of good options, and Lara is relatively limited in her approaches to Bison that don't take a lot of... risk is the wrong word, but if she misspaces any of them even by a little bit, the outcome is usually fairly bad. Similarly, because you cannot be sure whether or not the player is going to come back towards you or not, it makes your life even harder. A Bison backdash could be followed by a Bison forward dash, but then you have to be waiting for that. You can't be trying to respond to it in the right spacing, or you'll just end up dying. That said, there is something to be said for straight guts, and it does often work out, as she is always a momentum-based character. There you go. Unfortunately, that spacing was off. As was that one. But only a little bit. And something's probably exploding again. But I know that wasn't the third round because Lara has a different ending animation, as do most characters actually. So now we have to see who ends up where. And who exactly lost what? No one. Okay. Probably doesn't matter. We are doing long-term rotations after all. So let's test the stability of this today.
Chun-Li. Chun-Li.
I think I mentioned on our previous stream, this stage, honestly this stage doesn't bother me, so if there was ever a time for it to show up, this would be it. However, anyone who has motion sickness might want to not watch this match at all, because the only thing worse than this stage is Chun-Li and or Rashid on this stage.
Round one. Fight.
But in any case, our relatively different styles means that technically everything I mentioned before still applies. And by before, I mean in the other matchup you just saw. In this case, I am the one that usually manages to maintain control of this matchup. And therefore, the same thing comes up. I don't necessarily have the life lead, but it's important that I spend minimal time carrying. And similarly, that I don't mess up my spacing at all. You can often tell when a match has gone into that space because either no one has meter or both players have lots of meter and it doesn't get used. Because what they're looking for isn't the standard interactions you might expect from them. Aw. That one turned out wrong. I missed the earth roll. I'm not sure, there's a lot of things that made it so that you make sure to hit the person, but I don't think you necessarily grab them. There were some adjustments made for this purpose. And the same thing now. I have control, and I have the life lead, so now I need to turn my brain off and not worry too much about whatever else might happen. My opponent is the one that I need to be stressed here. If I'm stressed, I'm going to mess up my spacing, I'm going to move too much, and I'm going to lose. So taking hits like that just doesn't matter. Even that doesn't matter as much. That one probably was more so slightly lag.
You win.
There are a lot of interactions in this particular mirror match. Most mirror matches have a lot of interactions, but more so it's about trying to see who can get to the right position and stay at advantage for the longest. But Chun-Li doesn't so much have advantage or disadvantage. It's all about choosing which move is the correct for whatever move you think your opponent is going to do. She is generally a character that has an answer to everything, but a lot of those answers can therefore easily be completely wrong. There, for example, that was a matter of me thinking to do a move and my opponent thinking to do the same move. I should really throw less Kikokins here. Unfortunately, one thing that does come up as a main problem in laggy matches is the fact that you're never quite sure whether or not your charge moves worked.
Round two. Fight.
And of course that punish gets hard, but that's nothing. That cross-up was not what I expected to actually work there. I don't even know what just happened. So yeah. Unfortunately, this move scales terribly, especially once you've got that in front of it. Why did I think that would work? I hit heavy kick, but I'm not sure why I thought that would work. Not back heavy kick, just heavy kick. I'm going to take that as my opponent making me think about everything and then setting up the spacing to where Chun has basically no answers, and the heavy kick, nothing I hit would have done the job. So you see it demonstrated here. My opponent's entire flow is slower than mine. They spend more time way back, and as a result of it, I can see through some of the stuff they do, but it doesn't matter if you can see through your opponent's stuff if it's defensive enough that you can't actually break it. That was supposed to be plus. But then again, you never know. That scaled oddly. When in doubt, punish lightning legs with lightning legs.
Round 2. Fight.
See? But you can definitely see the overall thing here. I get to spend a lot of time blocking. My opponent spends much more time setting up their spacing on screen, but not necessarily a lot of time doing anything. At least nothing that is actually a threat to me. I was so sure I was spinning bird kick. I literally saw like the startup frames of spinning bird kick and went for a punish.
Final round. Fight.
Since they don't have to jump. Okay, that was probably not what was supposed to happen there. Again, spacing, but I really need to think less. Fortunately, I'm quite used to the opponent moving to the other side of the screen situation. Not so used to that one though. Does this work? No. Because I couldn't tell whether or not the charge was enough. Oh, I shouldn't have lost that. My bad. This is much harder from the Bison side. I think I mentioned this before though. The matchup Bison can keep up with Chun-Li in footsies, if need be, but can only do it on a defensive set situation. So technically, Chun-Li just getting the life lead and walking away is among the best options she has. Unfortunately, she can fall into a trap with one of the easiest things in this game that you're taught not to do it. And I'm going to divulge the secret that has been told to others only by people like Justin Wong. Just jump. Especially if you have a good max range heavy kick jump. Not once she has V trigger 2 ready, usually. And sometimes you'll get a little hurt by lightning legs, perfectly timed, similar things. But if you've got a good enough jump with a really long kick, you simply have the mix-up of kick or don't kick. You can always jump. So when your opponent decides they're moving very far away from you, as Bison particularly, or any character with a long enough jump of this type, just jump. You can see here that dashing, for example, is hard work, and you might get punished. Similarly, it'll put you in positions where Chun-Li has more options than you do. But overall, you don't have to care about any of that. See? That spacing is not really something to do anything about unless you push too hard after it. And pushing too hard is the least of your problems usually. Situation just improves as a whole. So when the opponent is just staying over there, jump. It is definitely even more helpful to be the one on offense at that range, because it just is better. You can be punished in exactly one way that will actually matter for the long term. The very savviest of Chun-Li players who are playing full mid-range game and are ready will be able to hit you with exactly one part of a light spinning bird kick. But if you start caring about getting hit by one hit of a light spinning bird kick, you have other problems. Bison in particular has good combos out of even that maximum range heavy kick as well. This is for why it's for my purposes, I don't like to stay still in this matchup and I don't like to get far away, because I'm just going to get jumped at and it's going to hurt nearly every time. He also has enough ways to make moves safe and set up situations that even if you do get blocked in the middle of your pushing, you don't care really. But in the end, all you want, not necessarily to land these kicks, but you simply want to make sure that the Chun-Li player knows, if you just sit there, I'm going to pester you, and I'm probably going to win just by pestering you. The purpose? To make them do the thing you need them to do. Create a footsie situation where you can actually deal with her. Because these two play some really complex footsies, but again, it generally only works if Bison's on defense. I think they might have made some improvements to this by giving him the ability to cancel crouch medium kick into Psycho Inferno, but I certainly would not be in the position of a Bison risking this, because Psycho Inferno's behaviors with other moves and the damage it does are really inconsistent to me, and Chun-Li has a bunch of ways to cause herself to get hit strangely, and by getting hit strangely reduce her own damage. If you're thinking to yourself, well, why doesn't she just use an air-to-air? It actually doesn't work. It's uncommon to understand this, but you can make her miss the air-to-air as just demonstrated as well, simply by not doing the kick. So if you see her go into the air in response to you going into the air, just don't hit your button. I have a suspicion that I know this person. I just haven't talked to them in a long time, so I wasn't necessarily able to verify that. So, you know, I might have the fortune of being able to explain what they need to do in this matchup to them more specifically. But if I explain it, it won't really help right away because JustVine knows the counter to the thing I'm talking about too easily. It's just playing into her hands to a point, so it would be a bad situation for me explaining, do this, and then technically the thing I explained making it worse. If you are really good at spacing and aware that you have put yourself in a position where your opponent wants to jump like that, you can use the heavy kick, but a lot of the time it trades. And now we're back to the complicated footsies for a little bit. Actually, I've just realized it's being demonstrated. That is the answer, but most Bison will not immediately go, oh well, I'm just going to dash under slash through that, because there would be some concern about which button to hit. However, you often also want to stand a little closer, and therefore it stops Bison players from doing this thing in the first place. The jump isn't as useful if you have decided to be somewhere else. And we're back to complex footsies, as you see. How badly does this scale when the VT is in second hit? It looks like it's about the same, actually.
Final round. Fight.
If you realize that you're facing the sort of opponent who tends to rely on their range, as Bison, you have two really great options there. You can do back throw if you wanted pressure, but if you think to yourself, I keep on winning because this person does stay away from me and I can beat them when they do that, it's actually better to do the forward throw to put them in the position where they want to stay there. It just benefits you overall to do this. There's that footsies again. But I'm glad they're getting the chance to practice a lot of it, because it takes a lot of practicing. The meter advantage is probably just enough here that JustVine can't afford to take too many risks, because even with that health and even with the way the scaling normally works, yeah, this will happen. But, no, I think this kills, right? No, apparently not.
M.Bison wins.
If you're finding you have trouble with damage output on Chun-Li, chances are that you are using too many of her combos. She isn't a character who actually benefits that much from using her combos as she does from using her setups for positioning. She has a lot of cool flashy combos, but they don't always help. We've pushed a little bit past, given that. I'm not sure how much longer this lounge is staying open. We might restart it, in fact, possibly with DWuulfe as host, depending on what the plans for the night are. But this is definitely the last on-stream match of the night. I hope my analysis was in some way helpful. We got a little bit more out of it than usual. And having specific people around gives me lots more chances to talk about offense and defense mindsets. So I'm thankful for that going into another week of trying to actually play Melty Blood and similar games.
Round one.
This one might be a little faster. Because I believe that partially reminded JustVine that Bison can actually jump against Lara in very specific maximum space situations. Although he hits the heavy punch instead of the heavy kick at that point. This has to do with the way their moves work. Basically, for Lara, using the heavy bolt, the one that goes upward, just requires her to basically make contact with the enemy at all. It's effectively an aerial grab, sort of. But the thing to understand is that you basically are just going to get anti-air. There's no thing that happens that isn't an anti-air. I think the move can trade, but it trades with very few things, unlike standard button anti-airs. But Bison doesn't care a lot, given the height of his body from the jumping heavy punch, if he gets anti-aired like that, you see. Lara obviously can go for grabs, can get setups, but you're not like spending the entire match trying to jump on Lara. It's just a thing you can do when you think the match has gotten a little stale, or you just feel like your opponent spent a lot of mental space in the ground game. You might be able to get something out of it. Another weird thing, oh, there's the trade. And that was partially what I was getting at. I think the heavy kick always gets caught for some reason, but the heavy punch can actually trade with it. Making it a really good option, but it's so hard to remember that. Even if these two played more often, it's not really the core of the gameplay, so it wouldn't come up. So we're back to this moment of, I have control, you have meter. And once again, the key is turn off your brain. Not because it will make you win the match, but because it is not helping you win the match. There's at least a tiny chance that things will be better if you're not thinking about it. And very little chance of things being meaningfully better if you are thinking about it, because that's just not how Bison offense usually works. If you think I'm wrong about this, you can go ask Problemets. Not because I am certain that Problemets will tell you the same thing, but if anyone knows, it's Problemets, so you know. This matchup, for example, is the one where you'd probably want to go for the back throw nearly every chance you can. Because you don't benefit from being far away from Lara, it just resets you to the same situation you didn't want to be in. And usually when their interactions go south, it results in Bison being in the corner somehow, so back throws are a good default to have most of the time. One other decent method for Bison offense in this matchup is to waste a lot of time building up V-meter. And when I say waste time building up V-meter, it's actually kind of difficult to do because Bison's V skill does not usually absorb much. But pay very close attention to your V-meter, and once it's gotten up high enough, it unlocks like 3 main things you can do. You can slide cancel, you can forward heavy punch cancel, and you can get out of other situations just by moving. Unfortunately, as demonstrated, the activation, actually being able to use the move for anything, is a little harder. But if you're worried about it,
Lara players do have more trouble with Psycho Crusher, like just raw Psycho Crusher, than most other characters. So technically, one of the things that is causing our Bison problems here is the tendency to use the V-Shift. Because they'll end up being closer, the match will go on in a way that pushes toward it, and then the meter is used in V-Shift scenarios. Fortunately, if you do make contact with that, you do get something back, so it doesn't necessarily cripple things, but you can see that it doesn't necessarily pay off that much. Either way, that is the end of our stream for tonight. You can find all of our bots at 2_MK, 2-mk.org, and all of the information on when we are streaming, tomorrow being Melty Blood, and the day after that, Under Night, for example, at Twitter 2_MK_FGC. This has been Rillian 14 2MK. Good luck with your training and good night, everyone.